This is A History of Special Education by Janelle Torres. In these days, it is doubtful that any child may reasonably be expected to succeed in life if he is denied the opportunity of an education. This was a quote from Brown versus the Board of Education. I thought it was suitable to start off my PowerPoint, as it is a pretty powerful message. I like that it has any child, not just disabled, not the average child, not the above average child, but any child needs the opportunity for an education in order to succeed. Before I start, in my research, in both this class and my Foundations of Education class, which I'm finding is going hand in hand with this assignment, Horace Mann was the creator of the common schools. The common schools were funded by tax dollars to socialize children, improve interpersonal relationships, and social conditions. Again, that was early on. There was no specific schools for special education. During the 19th century, schools, or I guess more so classes, did exist, but they were for disabilities like deafness, blindness, mental retardation. They were hard to find, and when you did find one, they weren't always the best to go to. A good class or school was very rare. During the 20th century, these schools became more common, so it was easier to find a school that would cater to a special needs child. One of the turning points was the 1954 Brown versus the Board of Education ruling. While this specifically pertained to African American children, something that was really stuck out to me was this quote here: "Segregated schools have no place in the field of education." That statement right there tells us that segregation in any form has no place in education. The ruling of this case brought about the question: does segregation of children in public schools solely on the basis of race, even though the physical faculties and other tangible factors may be equal, deprive that child of the minority group of equal education opportunities? This question is what brought parents of children with disabilities to the foreground. They were able to now voice their concerns and bring up lawsuits against school districts. In the 60s, we had the beginning of Congress starting to pass acts that help children with disabilities. The 1965 Elementary and Secondary Education Act, or ESEA, was enacted by Congress to address the inequality of educational opportunities for underprivileged children. Again, this wasn't specifically to special needs kids, but it was like a gateway. It was a doorway to say, hey, we hear you, we're going to try to fix this and do something. In 1966, the ESEA was amended to add a grant problem, or to establish a grant program for the education of handicapped children. This led to the 1970 Education of the Handicapped Act. This act was important, as it encouraged the states to develop educational programs specifically for individuals with disabilities. The 70s is when we really see all of the action happening to help these special needs children. A few events that were critical in the shift for change in our education system was the PARC, or the Pennsylvania Association for Retarded Children, versus the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and the Mills versus Board of Education of DC. These two cases were monumental in changing legislation and getting results that showed change for the better. In 1972, after these two cases, the Congress launched an investigation to see how these previous acts were helping change the way we educate our handicapped children. The results were not what they wanted. I'm going to read you some of these statistics. There was, of the 8 million children investigated, there were 3.9 million who were receiving an appropriate education. 2.5 million were receiving an inappropriate education, and 1.75 million were receiving no education at all. That means over half of the children were either not getting an education or receiving the wrong type of education, not getting the help they needed. This led to the 1975 Act, the Education for All Handicapped Children Act. This established that all children with disabilities have a right to education, and to establish a process by which state and local education agencies may be held accountable for providing educational services for all handicapped children. This is what parents were fighting for. They wanted their children to be able to go to school and to be protected and have an education. The 2001 and 2004 acts, the No Child Left Behind Act and the Individuals with Disability Education Act, or IDEA, improved upon previous acts. So they worked in accordance with the ESEA to further strengthen the education of special needs children. Both of these acts focused on accountability and improved outcomes. By knowing the history behind special education, we can have a better understanding of where the families of disabled children are coming from. They have had a long fight, and disabilities are something that have been around since the beginning of time. And to say that only just in the last century have we been making any progress shows the hardships that these parents have gone through and had to fight for. As educators, we can learn and understand where the industry has come from and where it can go in the future. Now that we have basic rights in place, advocacy groups can work toward a number of different goals. Some of these goals include better teaching methods, recognition of a wider scope of disabilities, and greater choice of schools. So while we do have programs in place that help disabled children, there's always room for improvement.